Hello everybody, hope you're doing marvellously well. We are back with another Frequently Asked Questions Friday. FAQ Friday. Please hit that subscribe button down there. If you hit the notifications bell, you will be notified when we have a new video. And of course, you can go to producelikeapro.com and sign up for the email list and even try out a free 2-week trial of the Academy. It's a lot of fun. There's lots of amazing people in there and everybody helps each other. Okay, this is my favorite part of the week. I get handed these questions, I read them and I answer them off the cuff. It's a lot of fun. All right, so our first question is this. How do you protect a final mix that you're sending to a client if you're sending it before they pay you? What a marvelous question. Okay. Well, I think there's several things you can do. Firstly, send an MP3, not a WAV. Now, you might argue that the MP3 is not as high quality as a WAV, so maybe, look, obviously there is a difference in quality between an MP3 and a WAV. However, every single mixer I know, within reason, sends MP3s for approvals and recalls. Firstly, it's quick and easy to upload and download. Not the WAV files are big, but if you give out your WAV file and they haven't paid you, that is obviously, could obviously be a problem. So obviously I would stick to an MP3 and not send a WAV. Secondly, if it's a mix, then get paid half up front before you even start. I never start working on anything unless I've had at least a 50% deposit. That's just the way it is. Doesn't matter if it's a label or an independent artist. Give me 50% up front and then I will work on your music. Simple as that. So you should already have had half of your cost covered. So if they do decide to walk away, which is rare, but I suppose it does happen, at least you have the deposit. The other thing is you could always do a contract if you want to protect yourself. Most people have simple 2-paragraph contracts that they do, saying X number of visions that you will do, recalls if you like, and just stipulate exactly the terms of payment that you expect to be paid immediately on delivery of the final master. I would say, honestly, have good dialogue with your client. I think one of the difficulties when you have automated systems that people can maybe upload their files and you can do everything via email is you don't get a feel for the person. I would say it's worth a phone call, it's worth several emails, it's worth time to communicate. And frankly, if they're going to be a little shady, it's pretty obvious. I have had a couple of clients over the years do that, but it's been only a couple, and I had early warning signs, and I should have walked away. So, establish a good relationship, a good repartee with the client. Make sure that you're talking all the time, whether it be email or phone or both, so that you really have a good understanding of how quickly and you're going to get paid and how easily you're going to get good communication from them. Is there a future for immersive sound if the public is graduating to single source devices that are voice controlled? Alexa, play Queen. That's a really good question. I mean, yes, there is definitely a future in it, but I also understand your question. Most of us listen to music on laptops, cell phones, and not all of us have a pair of Genelecs or Focals or Callies, or whatever it might be behind us. Yes, most people are in environments where they're listening through one of those single kind of Beats / you name it, Bose radios, all those kind of stuff. We're not listening to traditional 70s hi-fis with these huge, speakers and component hi-fis and all that stuff. So I understand your concern. However, immersive sound is making its way into cars. It's going to be a big thing. A lot of us spend a lot of our lives inside of a car. So if they start getting a sound system in the car, which is unbelievable, my wife's sound system, for instance, is fantastic. It's absolutely amazing. It's better than a cell phone. then it's a really, really good sounding system. That's going to get better. Then, of course, there's all these kind of video game headsets that are coming out where they're going to start getting into like full-blown immersive sound, so that when you're in a virtual reality, the sounds are going to move around with you. It's really getting quite crazy. So as much as I understand your concern about these little like Beats kind of single mono or, fake stereo kind of devices, it's always been like that. Not everybody had really amazing stereos in the 70s, and we didn't all just sit there in the perfect listening position. That's a fallacy. I grew up as a kid, and I remember 1 out of every 10 parents' houses I went to had amazing stereo systems. Most of the time when I was a little kid, it was cassette players, and obviously the cassettes degraded. Most of the heads on those things were dirty. Everything sounded like muffly. Lots of kids were listening on like old hand-me-down grandparents' AM radios, cassette radios. I mean, have you listened to AM radio? Talk about ridiculously small bandwidth. So my point is like we're in a better situation. And, home theaters now, that's going to become more and more commonplace, where people have these incredible flat screens and they start having this kind of immersive audio experience. So is it going to happen overnight? Of course it's not. But should you be thinking about future-proofing yourself? Definitely. If you've got the capabilities to run 88.2 and 96K, do it. Run the highest possible quality you can. Just to let you know, labels are asking for their sessions to be done like that. About 4 or 5 years ago, there was a big email that was circulated around from the major labels, going around all of the different producer managers asking for all of the quality to step up, because they were trying to future-proof themselves, because film and TV is already moving way ahead of us. So, if you can, record at the highest possible rate you can. To what extent are production techniques tied to the type or style of music? Would some techniques applied today sound right on songs recorded years ago? Honestly, the short answer to that, for me at least, would be yes. I'm blessed to sort of have 1 foot in all kinds of, several feet in all kinds of different genres and different time periods. My mentors are guys like Shelley Yakus and, of course, Jack Douglas. And before them, when Don was still alive, Don Smith taught me a lot in the mid-late 90s. These, and Dave Jordan, late 90s as well. These guys all grew up entirely in tape and then saw the digital revolution. I grew up at the end of tape, and I firmly was baptized in the digital revolution. So I see it all. When I was a kid in the late 80s and early 90s, I DJ'd. When I first moved to LA in 95, I used to DJ hair conferences and do all kinds of play the Orb and Chemical Brothers and all of this kind of stuff. I remember playing 5-year-old Left Field in 95, 96, and it was cutting edge here at the time. So I can tell you that, all of that stuff is still relevant. I believe that any great music steps across great, divides of genre. Isn't that what made the Beatles so amazing in the 60s? It made them completely amazing that they could have sitars and tablas and all of these different instruments, orchestra and big band elements Got to Get You Into a Life. They had all this stuff blended into the traditional, guitar, bass and drums pop band. So they were breaking down barriers. That carried on through with all of the great bands. U2, if you go back to U2's late 80s, early 90s work, it's freaking amazing. It's amazing. They were taking loop and dance music ideas and incorporating it into their music. It sounded a little strange at the time, and they really were pushing the boundaries in the late 80s and early 90s. But now you listen to it and it still sounds like the future. They knew how to blend in the world of programming and synths and loops and stuff into a rock band. If I go back a little bit further than that, Queen, the game, you had them experimenting with synths and disco. And the point is, all the great rock bands blend other genres as well. And now, of course, you've got EDM, dance music, which has been massive in Europe since the 80s. Now, since the sort of late 90s, early 2000s, has really grown massive in America. Finally, grown massive in America. And it's pushing all kinds of boundaries as well. And I still think there is a lot of future in blending all of those genres. Now, that was a long story. If you're talking specifically about the techniques, which you are, yes, I do think so. Because Pro Tools can be a heavily editing machine, or it can be a tape machine. It can still be a way of capturing things. It just makes a lot of things easier. Where the Beatles would have had to have chopped up tape and looped stuff, now you can just go and loop it. Does that mean they would have done it differently? I don't necessarily think so. I think the creative mind is the creative mind. I think if you'd had those capabilities for Queen when they were making Bohemian Rhapsody, or the Beatles when they were doing Sgt. Pepper, they still would have had the same incredible creative ideas. They just would have been able to complete them a little quicker. That's it. I still listen to Sgt. Pepper's, I still listen to Bohemian Rhapsody, and I still think those are some of the greatest recordings ever made. I don't know if they've ever been bettered, regardless of technology. So all technology does is give us the ability to do things a lot quicker. For instance, people used primitive drum samples in the 70s. By the time the 80s came along, there was drum samples. Now you can go copy and paste and put them across a kit. It's so much quicker and easier to do. However, it was always being used. People slowed down tape to half speed to play things in time. In disco, they used to measure the distance between the kick and the snare and then make it so that it was laid back and measure them all equally. So they cut the tape up into exact lengths and then put leader tape in there and made them all exactly the same. So it had this consistent groove. Now I can open up Pro Tools and I can create a groove template and apply it across a drum kit and get the same result. The point is it's not the technology, it's the creativity. The technology makes things massively quicker, but the creativity is still the most important thing. Is the creativity there? Is the artist and the producer there to come up with these incredible ideas that made some of the best music in the world? That's the most important thing. Now the technology is there to make it easier. I think that's just a reality. Have you ever had to deal with a client whose vision for the song totally clashed with yours? Goodness, yes, of course. That happens all the time. That happens with your best clients. David and I, for instance, the Word Day release, as you know, if you watched any of our recent videos, have done a lot of work together over the last few years. I have been producing and managing him now for quite a few years. He's an insanely talented guy, and sometimes it just flows. When we did that song with that mic the other day, we did it in about 20 minutes. However, there's been plenty of times where we have spent days hardly doing anything, discussing, changing ideas, like butting heads on stuff. It's okay. Out of greatness quite often comes a little bit of clashing here and there. If it's all hunky-dory and just like, oh, everything's so beautiful and wonderful, it's probably going to be the most boring piece of music you've ever heard in your life. So it's okay to have a bit of clashing. It is okay. I will say, and I've said it, CJ Vanston said it, and Shelley Yakus, who was here yesterday, said it, just go in and try out the idea. If your artist has an idea which you think is crazy, let him do it. Let her do it. Let them do it. Let the artist do it. And conversely, if you have a crazy idea, try it out. And you know what? Listening to the two ideas back to back is a pretty good way of deciding which one's right. You're never, ever, if something is bad, you're never, ever going to think it's good. You can bite your tongue and go, no, I still like it. But the reality is, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if it works, who knows? You may never have thought of it. That's the great thing about working with artists, working with producers, is the fact that you get this creativity and you get to work off each other. So don't be afraid of clashing. Don't take it personally. Don't get overly emotional about it. Just remember that you're all there for the same reason, to make greatness, to make incredible greatness in music. And so sometimes that comes with some clashing, and you know what? It is worth it. So I hope you're enjoying this. Please, of course, hit the like button, the notifications bell, and if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe. When you're done with the project for a client, what files do you provide with them as part of the final product? I know most provide stems, but at the pro level, what are you usually asked to provide? Oh, that's pretty huge. I think for when it comes to label projects, they expect you to back up exactly what you've got. They want to hear everything that you've got. One of the difficulties is the way the industry's changed. So it's a really good question, because the way the industry used to be is you had a 24-track 2-inch tape where, yes, it was definitely recorded the way you wanted to hear it, but somebody still had to mix it. Somebody still had to break it out over a console, apply EQ and compression and effects, and mix that song. And that was another big step. Now, increasingly, I mix sometimes in the box, 60% of the time hybrid. But the point is I'm moving between the two. So if I give you a hybrid session, it's not going to sound like the album. But if I gave you an in the box session, then of course it's going to be the album. And here is probably where your question is coming from, or at least it's part of your question. The problem is when you send an artist that session, they now have your mix, and this is where it gets sticky. You can have some unscrupulous people which will hand it to their friend. They'll turn up the hi-hat, pan the guitar over there, and then say mixed by the new person. I have had it done to me. And it is annoying. So you have to learn how to read and understand your client. If your client is reluctant or difficult to work with, and making things, that's where you might have to draw the line. That's where maybe you provide them with all of the tracks, but you don't provide them with the mix. Therefore, you can give them all the tracks, everything recorded on a nice, beautiful, plain, blank session with no plugins on it, nothing, and you can hand it off to them. And if they want to pay you to remix it or they want to pay somebody else to mix it, that's fine. I've only done that a handful of times, but I've done it with clients who have been so difficult and have made me do so much work that it's just, I know that I am basically, I'm basically handing over them the keys of the kingdom. I'm giving them a session that's just ready to go. But most of the time it's the label, if you're working for a label, that asks for the whole complete session. And then you have to back up the complete thing, and you should, because they need to know in 20 years' time, if they want to open that up, that they have a proper backup of it. You may be long gone by there. You may be retired, whatever. The point is like, it is your duty to have proper backups of it. Now, as far as creating stems, I personally believe that is an extra job. Stems are stereo files, so like stereo drum print, stereo guitars, stereo keys, background, whatever. The point is, when you do that, that takes a process, especially on a console. It takes a long time. You have to do it in real time. You have to print it through the bus compressor. It takes a while to get that to work the way it's supposed to. So be very, very careful. If you're going to offer up stems, make sure you plan, especially if you're on a console, to spend half a day doing it. A couple of songs might take you a couple of hours. An album will probably take you a day to do properly, especially if they want everything stemmed out in stereo and they want vocal ups and vocal downs and mix, instrumentals and TV mixes, which is the instrumental with the backgrounds. Be very aware what you're agreeing to do, because you can be adding a huge amount of work to it. So it's kind of a balancing act. I think it's understanding your client, whether it's an individual artist or whether it's a label, what their needs are, and making sure you get it discussed in the beginning. Because I've been stuck making stems for people before, and it can be a lot of work, and we didn't budget for it, and we're really busy. So don't put yourself in that position where you're in the middle of another project and you have to stop that project and start stemming out a whole album. Make sure you discuss it at first and either put it in as a cost in the budget, or let them know that if they want it stemmed out, they have to pay extra. Do you have any music of your own available? You are an absolutely marvelous musician. Well, firstly, thank you ever so much. That's super kind of you. I really am just a guitar player, and I've sort of expanded from that over the years. That's just what I am. Ultimately, I've said it many times before, I'll say it again, I just wanted to be Brian May, and I still kind of do. I'm sure a lot of us got started in music because we heard a band, we heard an artist, whatever it might be, and we fell in love with music. And mine, as we all know, and I'll mention again, is Queen. And of course, Brian May was my guitar hero, still is, along with Jeff Beck and many, many others. I mean, so many great guitar players. Anyway, getting back to the point, yes, I record all the time for YouTube, for the Academy, so people can mix songs. I do it all of the time. Most of the songs are quick, off the cuff. They're written specifically for a video. Sometimes the time you take to watch the video is probably the amount of time I've taken to write it. I've also written songs for other artists. Mark Broussard, of course, covered Perfect to Me, a song I wrote about my wife. There are plenty. Another Day, which is another song I wrote that one with him. There's plenty of great artists. Josh Radin I've co-written with. Tons of artists you can find that I am not the singer. I've never spent the time to write and record my own album. It will happen one day. It's just finding the time. I'm always juggling 500 jobs, and I'm blessed to be able to. So thank you ever so much for your question. I'm sure it will come one day. And as I get the songs up, I'll put them so they're available inside of the Academy. So please don't forget to go to producelikeapro.com and sign up for the Academy. Try it out. It's amazing. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and of course, leave a ton of comments and questions below. Thank you ever so much for watching. Have a marvelous time recording and mixing.